This question is testing statistics, which you might not have learned in much depth in school, but I think that at some point you would have learned what the mean of a set is, or maybe you just called it the average. That's the same thing. So sometimes called the arithmetic mean, but it's the average. And we need to know the formula for that. It is not given to us in the PSAT or the SAT, but luckily it's a pretty easy formula to know, and it is a good one to know just for life. We need the sum of the numbers divided by the number of numbers in our data set. So we're going to take these 5 numbers, right? 2, 9, 14, 23, 32, 5 numbers, and we're going to add them up and then divide by 5. So that's a pretty easy formula. Now, normally for this, I would just do the regular old calculator, but I want to show you what can go wrong with a formula like this if we're not careful. So if I'm just kind of mindlessly entering this into Desmos, I would do, okay, 2 plus 9 plus 14 plus 23. I hate the Desmos calculator for stuff like this on my iPad because it's very hard to hit those buttons. But luckily, that's why you can bring one if you need to for the real test. Now, when I add those up, I get 80. And I would just kind of stop there and use that 80 and write that 80 down on my page and then divide 80 by 5. But what a lot of you like to do is just cram as much stuff into the calculator in one step or one line as possible. Now, if we add the divided by symbol here, it's going to make a big mistake. It's going to divide just that last number by 5. And the same thing would happen if we use one of these calculators, though it might be less noticeable, because here we can see that the division is really only happening to the 32, but on the other calculator, especially a basic one like this, it's not going to look like that. And so this is where a lot of people make mistakes. Now, in this particular case, since we have multiple choices, we aren't going to get this wrong because we look at this and be like, oh, 54.4, that's not an answer. But a lot of these questions are just going to be those free response, student-produced response questions where there are no choices. So in those cases, a lot of you just kind of like out of habit, when the calculator spits out a number, you just take it as gospel, as the truth, and you don't even question it. But in this case, it wouldn't even make any sense. How could the average of these 5 numbers be 54.4 if none of the numbers are greater than 54.4? This is a good thing about statistics and a lot of the arithmetic work that we do on the test. Sometimes the answer just doesn't make sense with the initial story, but we need to get in the habit of checking that. So all of this is to say, what I really want to do is I could use Desmos and kind of divide everything. There's ways to highlight all those numbers I added and then divide. But I still just it's not hard to do this in 2 steps. So now I would just take my 80 and divide it by 5 on a separate step. And there we go. We get 16, which is the actual answer. That is it. So just be careful. Desmos or any calculator can be a really useful tool. You're going to use them on the test. There is no doubt that a calculator makes the math on the SAT and PSAT easier. But sometimes I think that the SAT is purposely asking you to do stuff that they know is easy to mistype or misrepresent in the calculator. And so if you don't know how the calculator works, you're going to get stuff wrong and not even realize why and have no clue. You'll know all the information you need, but if you're not entering it right in the calculator, you're going to get it wrong. And so just be careful, because a lot of times too, the SAT will give us answer choices that represent those calculator errors. So we have to be mindful of it and really be making sure that whenever we need to put parentheses, we're putting parentheses. Whenever we need to show our division dividing a bunch of things, we're showing it correctly. So lots of ways we can screw this up, but luckily lots of ways we can just visualize it and make it better. My biggest advice is anything that you enter in the calculator, just do one step at a time and then write down the result of that step on your paper so that you have it, and then do the next step with those numbers. That if you do make a mistake, you can kind of go back and pinpoint exactly where that mistake was.